And the thing I think that's what's common to us, the type of relationship that's very common to us, is a relationship where we are basically in a stance where we're asking, either overtly or covertly, how do I feel better? How do I feel better? Because we're all hooked up to prefer to feel better, are we not? I mean, biologically, every being, every organism, if given the choice, is going to choose to feel better, unless it's nuts. Unless something's gone, very wrong in its wiring, it's going to prefer to feel better than worse. And so everybody has that in them. Everybody would like to feel good. Everybody, everything, every being would like to feel good. And since this is, as I said, hardwired into even our biology, it's very, very familiar to us. How do I feel better? If I'm feeling bad, then we relate to everything as how can everything I encounter help me to feel better? If I'm feeling rotten, I want to feel better. Whether that's the next person you meet, or the next meal you have, or the next spiritual book you open, or the next teaching you're exposed to, whatever it is, it becomes, how can I feel better? This isn't right or wrong, it's just a particular stance. It's a particular way to move through the world. It's a common way. It's what we see all around us, is it not? Human beings desperately trying to feel better. Just feel better. And of course, the idea that comes along with wanting to feel better is enlightenment is going to help me to feel really, really much, much better. God must feel really, really good. Whatever that is, it must feel great. And that's what I want. So that's a way of... So we relate to the whole idea of enlightenment or reality, call it what you will. And we seek in many ways to feel better. A lot of people might not even be very aware that that's often their stance in life. So it's common to us. Like I said, it's hardwired into our system. Liking to feel good. So that's reasonable. Makes sense, does it not? Maybe if I come here to this retreat with this funny little man, maybe something here will be able to help me to feel better. That may not be true for everybody. I don't imagine it is true for everybody, actually. But it's a common way you could be here. Now, that's not a bad orientation. Like I said, there's something about it that's quite natural. Very, very natural. The problem is with it is it can only lead us so far. It can only actually take one so far. The urge to feel better will usually only take us so far. So far in the sense of becoming really, truly conscious. Because that's all spiritual awakening is, becoming conscious. That's what it is, becoming conscious. If we drop all the fancy words and labels and descriptions, it is going from a state of trance, a hypnotic state, to a state of being conscious, no longer hypnotized. And this drive that we have to feel better all the time is part of what puts us in a hypnotic state. It's not bad, of course, that we want to feel good, but it also has the ability to put us in a hypnotic state and make us do all sorts of nutty things. Has anybody in this room done nutty, crazy things in your drive to feel good? Yeah, I imagine you have, right? Just remember, high school, college, all the funny things you did to feel good. You know? So that's a drive. And even wanting to feel good can actually help make you quite conscious. That drive can be and is very, very useful to anybody, to everybody. Because really it doesn't feel good to be unconscious. It doesn't feel good for long. For a while, it can feel very, very good. It can feel very good to be asleep at the wheel. Right? It can feel great. You can be really good to be really deluded, you know. That's the problem with delusion. If it felt bad all the time, well then no one would get hoodwinked by it, would they? Do you know? But sometimes it feels pretty darn good, doesn't it? Even in a twisted way. You know? You get a moment of revenge. You feel good. Right? Admit it. It feels good. Depending on how conscious you are, it may feel good for only a split instant, or it may feel good for a really, really long time. But there's an element that you feel really good. Even something that's, you know, even something as silly as revenge. Illusion can feel good. That's why it's hypnotic. Being appreciated feels good, does it not? Someone coming up and saying, wow, I really like the way you did that. Wow, it's really wonderful. You're an extraordinary human being, by the way. Just wanted to let you know. It feels good, does it not? Right? And it's a perfectly fine thing to do. It's a perfectly fine thing to do. And it's perfectly fine to feel good about it, I suppose. But there's another side to it, is there not? We get addicted to it. It's how all addiction starts, doesn't it? You get a little bit and it feels really good. Right? You get a little bit and it feels really good. It seems to cure your problems for the moment. But then after a while, whatever you're addicted to, now you need it, whatever it is, whatever you're addicted to, you need it not to feel really good, but just to feel normal. Just to come back to a relative state of unhappiness. Do you know? So the desire to feel good, the desire to be happy, can actually, as in the examples I've just used, can help lead us into certain trance states, addiction to certain emotional states. But also, if you keep with it, if you really push it far, you'll start to realize that those trance states don't really feel good. Even that doesn't work. That to be addicted to even something like approval, appreciation, or love, or what are some of the other things we're addicted to growing up? Not substances necessarily. I'm talking about like emotional things, right? Recognition, success. You could go on and on, couldn't you? If you look back on your life, and you could spot relatively easily with a little bit of reflection what you became emotionally, psychologically addicted to. What kind of emotional states you became addicted to, that you get very nervous, unsettled when you don't get your drug of choice. When you don't get enough respect, you don't get enough love, you don't get enough approval, you don't get enough. One could go on and on, couldn't we? And again, it's not that any of those things are wrong. They're nice. They're nice. But to be addicted to them isn't so nice, is it? Not so nice at all. So, it's one way that we approach our lives, approach our own experience in any given moment. And the drive, the desire that eventually turns into a demand to feel good, becomes its own addiction. In our culture, we are addicted to feeling good. Not just their basic biology of wanting to feel good, that's quite natural, but we're not all hung up on just that, are we? We're addicted to feeling good, and I mean now. Right? Instantly. Instantaneous feel good. It drives our culture. It literally drives our culture. It certainly drives our economy. If anything that I'm saying ever caught on a mass appeal, the whole country would go down the tube. You see? Because half the people would lose their jobs, and happiness would not be good for the economy, I can guarantee you that. So I could go on and on about that, but this is just sort of getting started, so I won't really get into it. There is another way. There's another way to approach your own life, your experience, shall we say, your relationship with any given moment. And that's a relationship where you're really interested in the truth of the moment. What's really true. It's a very different thing to look at what's really true than what can simply make me feel good. In the end, truth feels better than illusion. But as a motivating force, the motivation to really know what's true usually comes out of observation. And some of you, I'm sure, have had these kind of observation. You can simply look around you. I'm sure many people in this room looked around at a very, very young age and noticed that the world was a pretty strange place. The people world was a pretty strange place. That it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when we're quite young. It's quite confusing. All these adults running around completely consumed with their own insanity. Yeah, it's a pretty confusing place. And we get a little bit older, and then I was just about to say, then we can't miss it, but we actually can miss it. We almost can't miss, at a certain point, the insanity that's taken to be normal all around us. And you've simply through your observation, through living your life, at times it breaks through, a little light gets in, a little crack in our own self-obsession gets through, and something reminds us. Something reminds you that, hey, what's going on? What's really going on here? What's really true here? Is there anything that's really true going on? You know? If you pay attention to life, it would make you wonder, wouldn't it? What's really true? It often starts with certain observations about what we call the external world and the people within it, how they move through it. Of course, nowadays where we're bombarded with, I was going to say news programs, but they're not really, are they? I'm not sure what to call them. Spin programs, that was good. Yeah, spin programs. Two idiots arguing, really. That's probably what it is. You always need two idiots arguing, right? One on this side, one on that side. Let them loose like a couple of pit bulls. And we're supposed to learn something from that, you know? But there is something to learn from it, really, because it highlights something about human nature, about us, about you, and about me. Because they are us, they are you, and they are me. And they show us something. This ridiculous way that human beings relate. I mean, if you watch something like that and you don't start to realize this is insane. These human beings that I'm watching on my TV set are nuts. Even if you agree with them, they're usually still nuts. Which I'm not sure what that says about us. I agree with this nut. He's my nut, you know. So I suppose with all of our technology, all of our media, at least human insanity is something that is very, very upfront for us. We don't have to go looking for it. We don't have to dig very far to see it. It's so highlighted, you know. It's so encouraged. Right? But out of this, possibly, every once in a while, someone starts being engaged in life. Someone starts to get an intuition that, hey, something vital is being missed. What's going on? Is everybody crazy? Is oneself crazy? What's really true? So I'm not even talking yet in some absolute sense. I'm just talking about when you observe the life. It brings the question all by itself. The question arises from the observation. What's really true here? Is there truth here? Or is there just this sort of chaos? And of course then when we bring that, when we get courageous enough we bring that inside, because we can keep fixated on the world out here, can't we? And we can be the judge, jury, and executioner of the world out here. And it's very safe to see insanity out here. But when we finally start to turn around and look inside, what most of us find is what's going on out here is the same thing that's going on in here. You may actually find that it can be a bit more chaotic and insane within your being, but nonetheless they actually mirror each other. So we're not actually talking about them or the world. The world actually shows us something vital about human nature. Human nature. So what's true becomes a whole new orientation. What's really real, what's really true. Now most of the people I can see in this room, simply from the age that you are, the ages that you are, I think most people in this room are old enough to have probably been through your own search for truth in different ways. And you've probably exposed yourself by this time in your life to a whole lot of ideas. Whole lot of ideas. And you've probably, I imagine for some of you, you've seen that all the ideas, you really don't find the truth in the ideas. Which if you haven't got there yet, you will, don't worry. Oh, you might want to worry because it's kind of devastating. Do you know that devastation when you realize there's no idea is going to save you? Do you know what I mean? No matter who it came from, no matter how high the authority, no matter how far back in history, no matter how mythical the being may or may not have been, that really they do not have your answer for you. But within each of us, as I said, is this desire to feel good, desire to be happy, fulfilled, satisfied. And there's also inherent within us this desire for truth. And when I say desire for truth, I don't mean this as an adult thing, necessarily. We turn it into this very highly educated adult thing. Does that make sense? You know, what's really real? It sounds so adult, doesn't it? What's real? What's true? Like, it sounds very abstract, I think, to a lot of people. But, you know, for those of you who've had children, you know that children have a great interest in what's true. What's this, Mommy? How does this work, Mommy? Where does this come from? Why? 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 Well, because da-da-da-da-da. Why? Well, you see, da-da-da-da. Why? Well, see, it works this way. Why? You know what I mean? Yeah, the 2 or 3 or 4-year-old will drive a physicist to the edge of their knowledge and then right off the cliff, you know? Well, see, Johnny, E equals MC squared. It's so, you see? Why? Well, hell, we don't know why. Why not? Do you see? So there's a thing in us that's when I say this desire for truth, it's a curiosity thing. It's something that's very alive. It's living. It's a curiosity. I think, unfortunately, many of us adults get it sort of crushed in our system because it's so directed. You know, it's like, oh, no, you've got to learn what I want you to learn, and it gets so directed that it loses its allure, it loses its sparkle, it loses its mystery. Do you know? The mystery of curiosity. Because when I talk about like inquiry, what is true, what I really mean is that curiosity that's innate within us. So and curiosity is innate. As innate within us as the drive to be happy, to feel good. Yeah, curiosity is a very, very powerful force within us. You know? So when a child goes through that stage in their life where they're asking lots and lots of questions, they want to know lots of things. That's their innate curiosity. That's the drive within life to know what's really real, what's really true. How does this work? How does that work? It's a beautiful, beautiful drive. So through both of these, life endeavors to become conscious. And that's why we're all here. Because life is endeavoring to be conscious of itself. That's it. That's really what's going on. Our own, what we think of as our own personal spiritual search really isn't our own at all. And it's not really near as personal as we may think. Although it unfolds in a very personal way, it's really life seeking to become conscious. And it's bound and determined to become conscious. For or against your will, with or without your cooperation. You can completely walk away from any apparent interest in truth, and you can't actually walk very far, because it will come find you again. Somehow, somewhere. You can't get away from yourself, can you? Although, God, do we try, especially in spirituality. But this is a really, really quite important thing to understand. If our drive simply to feel better is always driving us, then our interaction, especially with, let's say, since we're here on a spiritual retreat, with our spiritual lives, much less the rest of our lives, but our spiritual lives will be, how do I feel better? So if I have fear, my question will be some form, some version of, how do I get rid of this dreadful fear? Which means what? How do I feel better? If I'm confused, how do I get rid of this awful confusion? Nobody ever comes to me and says, I'm blissed out. How do I get rid of this? I'm extraordinarily happy. Can you help me with this? Never happens, do they? It just never happens. But when we're uncomfortable, when we have discomfort, then that drive often takes over, and that drive is really just, the way it's operating is, how do I feel better? How do I feel better? It may couch itself in very abstract spiritual terminology, but it can very easily be just an extension of how do I feel better. And if how do I feel better is divorced from any interest in truth, then it can only take you so far. Because the truth of the matter is, part of what helps us become conscious is not feeling better. Is it not? I don't mean that I would suggest pursuing not feeling better as a way to get more conscious. I don't think you probably would anyway, but it's part of what helps bring clarity to our lives. You're in a moment of confusion, doubt, anxiety, guilt, shame maybe, confusion, existential angst, dread. Now, these things are very, very, very potent spiritual motivators. They're not states that anybody in their right mind would pursue. But if our orientation is simply to get better, to get past them. I'm a little anxious today. How do I get rid of being anxious? I got a little existential dread that visited me last night. How do I get rid of that? See, then we're actually asking, how do I go back to sleep? Does that make sense? How do I check out again? But when we have that curiosity, when we really want to know it's true, then our orientation is a bit different. Orientation is more like, what is this trying to show me? In what way is my experience endeavoring to wake me up, to make me more conscious? How does uncomfortability serve you then, you see? What's really real? When you start to get onto this, you discover a different orientation. An orientation that has much more power than simply the drive to want to feel better all the time. And remember, you do want to feel better all the time. It's hooked up in you, biologically, so don't even try to get rid of it. If you do, then you just sort of twist life in a grotesque way. Do you know when you like, in the past, I'm still sure people still do it in the present, when they do all sorts of ridiculous things to try to squash that drive to feel good. You go out and you become an ascetic. You stop eating very much. You starve yourself to death. You put, what they used to put on, some of the Christian mystics and stuff, they wear like things around their neck that would keep poking into their bodies, like, what the hell they call, I can't remember what they were even called though. But it's like a necklace full of nails, so you could constantly be in that state. So God forbid you started to feel good for a minute, Spirituality of all types is littered. The history is littered with people trying to do these things, and they turn life into something sort of grotesque when that happens, When somebody notices that the drive to feel better can make you unconscious, to go around trying to solve that by feeling rotten is just kind of, it's silly at best. Not that anybody in this room, I think, is probably pursuing that path. I hope not. And the most important thing about this curiosity part, this different orientation, is that it roots you in back into your own life. It roots you into your own experience, into what's actually happening, actually right now. What's happening right now? What's real right now? Not, can I find a reality tomorrow, but what is real right now? And if you notice, you might even feel in yourself how habitual this tendency is among us to look elsewhere, to look outside of one's own experience, even with a question like that. What's true in your experience right now? And the mind would go, and it'll start to think. Start to scan inside its head. I don't know. That means that the mind's not actually paying attention to right now, you see. It's still in an abstraction. So the beautiful thing about what's really real is that it pulls your attention back into this instant, Takes you out of all abstraction. And so then there's a lot of power in that. Then the whole path becomes something of the willingness to be extraordinarily honest with yourself. Which is a hard thing for a human being to sustain very long, is it not? To be really, really honest with yourself. To really, really be honest with yourself. Very difficult for a human being to sustain that within themselves for very long. To be really, really quite honest with yourself. To stay with it.